The bow has always been one of my favorite weapons in the Monster Hunter franchise. It's fast, it's mobile, and it's ranged, all of which can help you stay safe while dealing tons of damage. You still have to worry about positioning, but only to the extent that you're staying within range and not getting absolutely walloped by the monster. Regardless of whether you're new to the bow or just returning from Monster Hunter Rise, this guide will cover all of the moves, changes, and some key strategies to help you master it. The first thing you need to know is how the bow works. It's pretty straightforward if you played literally any other video game with bows in it. You hold the aim button, or don't, technically you can charge on the run, and then hold the firing button. The bow will charge up, indicated by the reticle changing twice, and the weapon glowing brighter. There are only ever 3 additional charge ranks, with the default shot being charge level 1, and generally you always want to hit that maximum charge every time you fire. That may sound tedious. Aim, charge, fire, aim, charge, fire, but there are ways of extending that charge after shooting, namely by dodging. This is a super common tactic where you charge up your weapon, fire, and then immediately dodge. Fire, dodge, fire, dodge, fire. You just keep going. You can mix this up with other abilities like Power Shot, which I'll talk about in a bit, and the charge will remain until you fail to dodge in time, which usually means you ran out of stamina. Alternatively, you can never hold the bow and just fire as fast as you can. Doing so will rotate through the weapon's charge levels. So what is ideal depends on the bow and is ultimately up to you. Sometimes you may only want the highest level. Sometimes you may want the earlier levels. Bows can be complicated where uncharged shots can actually be more powerful. The system is kind of weird like that. As a whole though, the bow is all about having as much stamina as possible and to keep your damage uptime as high as possible. So you should expect to be using armor perks that reduce stamina usage, perks that increase your stamina, etc. And you should do so for your food as well. For example, in Rise, most players used Constitution to reduce stamina reduction speed, and Stamina Surge to increase the stamina rate regain. Another thing that is unique to bows are coatings. These basically change what type of arrows you're using. For example, in Rise, there was Poison, Paralysis, and Sleep coatings, which do exactly what you'd expect. Poison the monster so it takes damage over time, temporarily stun it like a shock trap would, and put it to sleep. Naturally, this is an instant. Each arrow fired builds up over time, and how susceptible the monster is to each type will affect how long it takes for the status effect to actually take hold. The same is true for the other coatings. Blast, which when completed causes an extra burst of damage, typically good at breaking parts. Exhaust, which causes the monster to have less stamina and weaker attacks. The other two are in a little category of their own. Power coating, which is just straight up stronger than regular arrows, but limited. And close range coating, which provides an increase in damage at the cost of reducing your effective range. From the looks of it, Wilds has also added a pierce arrow that gives them the ability to pierce through foes, doing multiple ticks of damage with each one. With all that said, I can't really wait any longer to get into the changes specific to Monster Hunter Wilds. Easily one of the biggest is that your ammo coatings are no longer crafted or consumable. Instead, it's now controlled by a trick arrow gauge, which you can see on my screen. This new resource charges up as you land attacks and execute dodges. A full gauge will now effectively let you store up to 24 coated arrows, but only 8 can ever be loaded at a time. This is a huge change. Not only because you no longer have to craft ammo, which is something that can be hard for new players to keep up with, but because you're no longer limited in how many you can carry. So many of my fights in Rise involved heading out to the monster, using my most powerful ammo, and then being stuck with nothing but close ammo coating until the fight was over, or I ended up carted back to camp where I could finally restock. Since who really wants to pause just to go back and grab 50 more power coatings? It feels like a waste of time. Now you can adjust on the fly. Since there's a cooldown on status effects, you can use that poison coating until it sticks, and then instantly switch to power coating to deal more damage. And once the cooldown on that poison is over, you can instantly swap back without having to worry about ammo inventory. Keep in mind though that each bow has its own set of coatings that it can use. For an example, let's take a look at some from Monster Hunter Rise to explain some things. The Queen Blaster 1 bow, for example, has 110 attack, 13 fire elemental damage, and 0% affinity, which in short is the odds to critical hit. Note that that's separate from the orange criticals that pop up when hitting an enemy's weak point. The Queen Blaster has 4 charge shot levels. At charge level 1, it fires rapid level 2. At charge level 2, it fires rapid level 2 still. And at charge level 3, it fires spread level 3. Keep in mind that that 4th charge level, at least in Rise, was locked behind a perk to unlock it. So while there may be 4 in Wilds, you may need a perk to unlock those. You can see that it can only use close range, poison, and para coatings. So in this case, you'd only have access to those 2 status effects in 1 damage boost. Power coating is the one general exception, as it is universal to all bows, at least in Rise, with a relative damage increase of about 35%. While we're on that, let me touch on affinity a bit. Affinity can be both positive and negative. At 0% affinity, there is no chance for a bonus or penalty to damage. A positive affinity indicates that there is a statistical probability of the hunter landing a critical hit. Critical hits deal an extra 25% physical damage, which is raw damage, to monsters, unless the player has the critical boost, which increases it by a respective amount. A negative affinity will do the opposite. You'll have a 25% chance of doing less than normal damage, a 25% penalty. Generally, you want to avoid those, but there are some armor sets in the game that are mostly jokey, where negative affinity is good. It's really strange. Just generally avoid it. If you're new, just generally avoid negative affinity. This is also the first time I've mentioned spread and rapid in this guide, but there's also another type, which is pierce. I am 100% going to oversimplify here because damage calculations get complicated fast, particularly with bows, which has projectiles and stuff. But as the rapid level increases, it fires more projectiles. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4, with higher elemental damage ratios as the levels increase. For spread, again in order of ranks, goes 3, 3, 5, 5, with better damage ratios as you go. Higher is always better. Pierce is different in that it only fires 1 shot, but the damage ratio goes higher, again, with each rank. And in short, rapid, generally, medium range, spread, close range, and pierce is long range, as each arrow type has different ranges. Okay, God, that was a lot. I hope all that made sense. Let's dive into bow moves now. Since I've already covered charging shots and dodging, I'll skip that here. But another one of your main moves is the power shot, which can be used to maintain your charge level after dodging as well. It's basically a really quick blast of arrows in a wide arc. In essence, you maximize your bow's charge level, and then you switch into a dodge power shot repetition until you run out of stamina. There's also the power volley, which is a slightly stronger version of power shot that can only happen after power shot, but with a longer animation and an extra arrow or 2. In Rise, it really was never worth using, but we'll have to see how things shake out in Wilds. And you know how most weapons have that one move with that really long animation but high damage numbers? For bow, that's Dragon Piercer. It's a charge attack that locks you into place and limits your turn radius while you execute it. It's a good way, if you're solo, to detonate bombs and wake monsters up if they're asleep. But as a whole, it wasn't the highest DPS decision to make in the heat of combat. Say if a monster is stunned and it locks you in place, makes you vulnerable, so generally people avoided it. In Wilds, they've introduced an alternative in Thousand Dragons, which is a spread shot instead of a pierce, but is only effective at closer range. And while it doesn't have as long of a wind-up animation, it still has one that locks you in place and leaves you staggered for a short time after, so you better make sure it hits. Another swap. In Rise, Arc Shot was entirely useless. You only ever used it by mistake. They've tried to rectify that in Wilds. It still doesn't do a ton of damage by itself, but it does apply tracers to the enemy. The goal of these is then to hold your focus fire mode, Hailstorm, and lock onto all of these before sending out a blast of arrows that detonate all of the tracers and have a really good chance of staggering or stunning the monster. It's also just super satisfying to do. In addition, sometimes you can combo that with Dragon Piercer. I don't know if that's the most effective thing. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure what sets that off, but it is something to keep in mind. The last addition I'll talk about is Ready Tracer. It's a particularly good move for anyone who has a hard time aiming, as it makes all arrows home in on it, including Dragon Piercer shots that are set to go wide. These don't last long, however, maybe only 10 seconds. But during that time, all arrows have critical hit status, and even at charge level 1, they are shot with maximum charge. That's powerful, but it also helps you with damage range issues, as your close range attacks can instead be diverted to critical hits even outside of range. Now, we don't know if this will end up being something that's just nice or something that will be required in every single rotation. I'm sure people have started to do the math, but I am not that person. Maybe we'll find out shortly after launch. And as we wrap up, there's also a Flying Swallow shot, which is basically an extended dodge with an attack mixed in. It's useful to keep in mind for when you need just a little more distance to get out of the way. Now, I know this isn't everything. Again, I come from Rise, so I was used to the wire bug attacks and such. But obviously those aren't here anymore. I've seen an attack, for instance, that causes your hunter to leap up in the air like a wire bug attack normally would, but I haven't learned how to do it myself, and it wasn't in those instructions in the training area, so keep an eye on the comments because I'm sure someone will let you know how to do it. So those are the basics. I'm not going to worry about armor skills, which are equipment skills now, because bows can have skills too, I guess. And since we're in the beta, naturally I don't have access to any specifics yet. Maybe that's something that can come down the line. But I wanted y'all to get up to speed on bows before you dive into the full release later this month. If you like fast, high damage gameplay with a focus on positioning, bow, perfect weapon for you. The changes in Wilds make it feel better than ever, with trick arrows making it even more engaging. That hailstorm is great to shoot. If you're new to the bow, just focus on your moves and stamina management first, and everything else will come in time. I'll be around in the comments to answer questions for the next few weeks, and will do my best to help any of you all out. If I forgot something, my bad. This stuff is really complicated. There's a lot. It's just a beta. We don't even have the full game yet, so things could possibly change. But, you know, is what it is. Hope it was helpful. The best way to support the channel is free, and that's to tell YouTube that you like it enough to engage with it. That's a like, a comment, or subscribe. Any of those is huge, even if you're just leaving a single emoji. For now, though, I think that's it. I'll see you next time.